Will Bitcoin affect startup funding? Coming up now. Hi, I'm Oliver and welcome back to the channel AskMeStartup, where we talk about startups, small businesses and the world that surrounds them. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and pushing the notification bell so YouTube lets you know whenever we're uploading new content. You can also download our free startup checklist, link in the description below. So today's topic, will Bitcoin affect startup funding? This interesting question popped through my mind because there are two things that I'm really interested in. One of them being Bitcoin, the other one being startups. Now, if you have been familiar with Bitcoin, you know that it had a tremendous run up from roughly $3,500 to $4,000 US in March of 2020 up to more than $58,000 as of recent. That meant Bitcoin passed all the way over to a market capitalization of over $1 trillion. Now, why is that relevant? That is relevant for startups because you might come into the position now that some of your investors are more likely to invest into Bitcoin than into your startup. Why do I say that? Well, Bitcoin has emerged from this, early adopter, nobody knows what you're talking about type of cryptocurrency to a perception of a store or potential store of value. Now, this is not about Bitcoin being good or bad, right or wrong. It is just the perception of people, which led to the fact that big companies like Tesla, MicroStrategy, and others have actually entered the Bitcoin space and they have taken on Bitcoin onto their balance sheet. This now brings affluent investors to think twice whether or not they should invest in Bitcoin themselves. At the end, they don't care about the technology and the decentralization, for instance. What they look at is, okay, I have the risky investments that I can do. I can either invest into a startup or I can, on the other hand, invest in Bitcoin. And you go like, wait a minute, why is that so important? Well, let's face it. Bitcoin has proven that it doubles its value every year over the last 12 years. No startup can prove that. First point. The second point, I can sell Bitcoin the second I want to sell it, I can get rid of it. This is completely opposite to shares and equity in a startup, which is really hard to sell, especially if the startup has not yet kicked off ground. So I've had a discussion with some investors, and those investors, were like, let's say 2 or 3 years down the road, they didn't care about Bitcoin. This was something exotic that was of no interest to them. But now they go like, wait a minute, I can get the same or even more predictable, better returns with Bitcoin than I would maybe with the investments that I do in all these startups. And keep in mind, an investor usually invests 10 plus startups because they know that out of those 10, maybe 1 or 2 actually just manage to break through. So is there a chance that Bitcoin actually takes away funds that were usually meant for startups and gets them allocated to Bitcoin itself? The short answer is yes. However, this is not going to be a huge sum. Why? Reality is that most of those investors are specialized in a certain field that they invest in. And if they're not really specialized on cryptocurrencies themselves, they might not necessarily focus on investments in Bitcoin. There are, however, some investors that do have different areas of investment, and they might be very well aware of Bitcoin and think, I'd just rather invest there than in the startups there. However, if you have a dedicated startup like we do, for instance, in the medical field, I know for sure that those people love to see technology develop and thrive, and they love to see that you can cure people or diagnose them early for cancer, for instance. This is a different motivation. Hence, this motivation cannot be, dealt with Bitcoin itself. So should you be worried when you have a startup that you might not get all the funds? Yes. Reality is, since COVID started, startup and seeds investors and funds have tried to push down valuations by 20-25%. I already did a video last year about this, and you can look it up here. Now, that should pop up into your mind in terms of thinking, why do they want those lower valuations? Well, the risk reward system doesn't work enough anymore for those people. They want lower valuations so that they potentially have better leverage on the long run. And if they compare themselves to what they can get with Bitcoin, you will have to do a long way. Either your startup is going to be a unicorn, or the valuations are going to be hard for you. Let me give you an example. Our company currently would give me roughly a multiplication factor of, I would say, 10-ish from the money I invested in. This is okay, and I'm not complaining about it, but Bitcoin would have given me 20 to 25x. So I'm now in the situation where, yes, I love what I'm doing and I'm happy I've done it, but money-wise, an investment in Bitcoin would have been the better choice. So what should you do as a CEO or founder of a startup right now? Well, you should really consider taking on Bitcoin as a fund into your company, because that would actually, make you eat the cake and have it too. How? First of all, you could use the Bitcoin and leverage against it. If Bitcoin keeps going up by the 100% that it has been doing over the last 12 years, and people are predicting it to do for the next couple of years, you have a rise in equity all the time without you doing anything on a startup. But you can use the loan to work on your startup, on the things that you want to develop. This way, the valuation of your startup and the product that you're developing, service, will go up. And Bitcoin also keeps rising up. You will not have to sell the Bitcoin, and the valuation of your startup will be double or triple what you could have achieved if you would have just chosen Bitcoin or just chosen the startup. All right, everybody, I hope this was helpful to you. Just leave a comment down below. Let's start a discussion on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and the future of startup funding. I'm looking forward to the discussion with you guys, and I see you next time.